Afternoon. So I thought I'd do another video. I've been incredibly slack on streaming and videos lately, but I've been posting more than normal in the Telegram channel, so I hope you've been able to follow some of that. I thought I'd do another video though, because there is quite a lot going on in the market, but it's also, it's just kind of easier to explain, isn't it? So let's just start quickly on Bitcoin. Yeah, I'll try and cover Bitcoin and Ether, the usual sort of format, I guess, Bitcoin and Ether and the data on those, where we are in structures, and then the majors at the end, or alts in general and the majors. I probably am not going to be able to give too much certainty, I guess, because we still need to wait and see. We're only on Monday this week, and we still need to wait and see what reactions we're going to get. So quick update on where we were at. I've kind of cleaned up my charts to some extent, just looking at the previous levels because there were crosses all over the place. We've come down now. So, okay, need to do that. So, okay, so as of last week, or when's that? 2 weeks ago, in fact, I had this line here as a possibility. So I've been looking, if you follow me, you'll know I've been looking at the structure here as very similar to 2021. And in fact, there are similarities in the more recent consolidations, and that makes life a bit more confusing now. But there were a lot of similarities to 2021 and this last up move. I've talked about this before, so I won't go into massive detail, but there was MicroStrategy was showing similar patterns, and MicroStrategy was looking more bearish in advance of Bitcoin, and obviously a lot of their value is in their holdings of Bitcoin, so it was kind of interesting to watch that. The equities have been less useful because they're a bit more like the blockchain related equities have been a bit more all over the place. They used to be better aligned, and they've sort of lost a bit of that alignment. I think half following TradFi and half following crypto. And then this structure was very similar with the Korean premium, which, as you know, I use as a major top signal and has been a very, very reliable top signal. And what we had here is when back in 2021, when the US dollar pair took out the high here, then Korea came back. Like it wasn't ready to fall, and it was only on that second high that Korea then took out the high. Now it's been a bit different this time because the US dollar pair took out the high. I'm not sure, I'd need to check exactly where it is, whether it's this one or this one, but I think, well, obviously we took out the high here, but Korea wasn't anywhere near because of the US dollar weakness. So the US dollar, Bitcoin US dollar, when the US dollar is weak, Bitcoin US dollar looks stronger, and structurally Bitcoin Korea is weaker. Is that the right way around? Hopefully that's the right way around. But then anyway, on this, I think on this last move, or maybe even that move, the Korean pair eventually then took out the high, and the premium kicked in massively again. But this structure, if you look on the 3-week time frame, the monthly time frame, although it took out the high more significantly here than back in 2021 here, where it only ticked over the high a little bit, this structure is very similar for sort of an expanded B wave. So I was then thinking, okay, well, if we follow that similar pattern, and if you look back at previous patterns, I've done this before, and even while a lot of people say this structure looks completely different to on the log chart to the 2017 structure, this looks very different to this. In fact, when I was mapping each of these bounces, while the magnitudes were different, it was actually very similar how the demands were holding and the supplies were rejecting on each of these bounces on the low time frame. So it was actually possible. I mean, you might be able to see some of that similarity here in this versus, I'm not sure exactly where, but like that, or that second section. So it was kind of interesting to watch that. But yeah, you do, obviously the markets have patterns that repeat. So one of the things I was then wondering is, while we have, it was a difficult one, and is still a difficult one, because we have this giant 3-month demand here, the big brown zone, which obviously was this orange cross, but previously I had that as a green cross, as somewhere critical that I want to see bounce. And it's a large zone, so obviously it can go deeper in the zone. But I then became a little bit more wary, just on the basis that a lot of people want to long here. So when I see a lot of crypto Twitter wanting to long in the same area, it makes me a little bit more wary. So the 93K area is a lot of people wanting to long. There's still a lot of people who want this low to get taken out and the CME gap to be closed there. And that was my question mark. You know, if it dips deeper into that orange circle. But really, we need to see some strength off this level. And obviously, so far, we had a decent bounce like first thing this morning, but it hasn't managed to get back through the new daily supply there. But yeah, so what I was considering then at this point in time is that we'd have some sort of little bounce here, not get terribly high, i.e. not even test back into this weekly, which is what happened. And I did have an entry here in this 8-hour supply for a more aggressive short entry, which I'll show you on the lower time frame. Come back up into here and then dump straight back through this level. And that's sort of similar to what happened in 2021. And we're looking at, so we had that similar wick down, and then we came back down to test that level. It tried to take out, actually don't think it didn't quite take out that low here, had this little bounce before dropping back to the start of the impulse. So it's looking at whether we were going to get a similar structure. Remove that circle now, whether we were going to get a similar structure in here with this being last week's consolidation and then dropping straight back down. Now, obviously, this time we've got the 3-month demand, which makes it more difficult and very different to here. Here, this had gone through, I believe that's a monthly demand. Let me just check. Yeah, so this did have a monthly demand here. The first bounce came down into it. It was a weak monthly demand because it barely broken the high. And then it came back down to the start of this last up move before consolidating and then the bigger drop. So similar here. We don't have a monthly demand in here, but we did have a 3-week higher. So let me show you the 3 weeks. So that's similar structure here. It bounced on that 3-week, went back up, but then has come back down and taken out that 3-week. So there's differences in the macro structure. However, obviously, we need to take note of what's happened previously because we're looking at like this demand is stronger. This demand did make a higher high, whereas the 2021 only made, like I say, took out the high just barely. So this is a stronger demand. It's also a higher time frame demand. So there are differences. But yeah, and I kind of put it, let me show you my Telegram channel. I kind of put it like I put it half jokingly and half truthfully. But yeah, so back, this is November the 4th, when we were coming down here. I think that's the red candle. Yeah, I put, you know, small bounce at 98 to 100 to get everybody excited for a couple of days and then dump to 85. So we've kind of had that small bounce at 98, or it's just between, yeah, 98 to 99 there, just below 99. Small bounce here to get everybody excited and then dump. Okay, so to 85, like I say, was facetious, but that was that point of that line. And then somebody asked if we're full bear now, and I said no, but if we break the 3-month, then yes. So take that away again, but obviously from a high time frame structural perspective, we are still, like I've said, I think the trend is dying off, but we are still in an uptrend at this stage. This is much more distributive than the previous. That was a bit distributive. But now, we're still in an uptrend. So unless we break that low, this is not in a downtrend on the high time frame yet. So it's nothing to get too worried about. I'm worried to some extent because of the fact of the distribution and the fact this is resembling 2021. And certainly if we come straight back down through here and we don't get any bounce where we are now or in this orange circle, I'm going to be a lot more concerned about it. Similarly now, so from a short perspective, we do have quite a lot of zones above. And in a way, that can be a good thing, because if it's not clear where price is going to reject, it can run through everything. And that was the other similarity that I was then looking at with these last consolidations. And I think even this one, let me just check the 3-day. Yeah, so I think I was looking at this one. So here, we'd come down, we'd made a 3-day supply. We didn't quite tap this demand, and then it went straight back up through the 3-day supply in there. And I think there was a weekly or something at the top here that it then rejected for the next move down. So, we get to the point where we might see some more significant moves. I can see that now, a mini pump at the start of New York here. Anyway, it's still very early days. So what we see across the market is that we've got quite a few 2-week and weekly supplies up here that with the zones inside that haven't been tested. So you can see I've got the 2-week supply up there, which is this higher cross. It would be the 61 fib, I think, of the fib all the way from the top. We've got a weekly supply in here a little bit lower. 61 fib of the more immediate down move is just at the top of the, sort of towards the top of that wick, which makes it slightly more difficult. Then on the lower time frames in here, we've got 5-day, and there's a 5-day supply confirmed yesterday, and we already had 3-day supplies. So quite a lot of the majors, I've alerted this general area, either the 3-day or the 5-day. Bitcoin, you can see the alerts there, just below the 5-day. And then this is also the local fib, I believe. So yeah, it's also the 61 fib of that last drop. So those are the kind of areas I'm looking at for short entry should we get back there. However, again, like I say, if we're, you know, I would expect to have some decent move off this 3-month. We need to see an impulse starting here. If we're going to get, you know, any sort of traction, it needs to show itself fairly quickly. And maybe we'll come down and take out that low again. I'm not sure. But then, so the first area of concern will be this 3-day, 5-day, and then with weekly, 2-weekly up here. And yeah, so like I was saying, we are either going to get a bounce here, which follows one of these previous patterns. You know, we just come down and consolidated, taking out some lows, and then we're going to start to get another up move. That's typically what you expect off a 3-month demand. Or, you know, we've seen some sort of macro distribution here. If we can't get through this daily supply, that's really not good. You know, we're going to drop down lower, and or we're going into a bit like a longer, bigger bear market. Yeah, so that's pretty much Bitcoin for now. If there's anything more to say, yeah, so the next zone of interest on the long side, like I say, we're already in one now. We've got a possibility of some messing around in here, maybe taking out the lows and closing that CME gap. And then we've got this weekly demand at the base of the 3-month, if it wants to dip deeper in the 3-month zone and still hold it. If that fails, then, you know, we're looking at 3-month demand down here, and then where's the annual down at 46k. Those are the possibilities. And yeah, the other things I haven't particularly liked about this is this sort of what looks like an ending diagonal. You know, it's messed around in here, and now it's rolled over. It's broken this larger trend line, very badly drawn there. Then we've got this much larger trend line. I think I ignored that wick, but all the way from December 2018, that's a way to go before we test that, but that will be around the bottom of this 3-month demand. So the problem we have now, I guess, is that there's a lot of different zones. So which one it's going to test, again, makes it challenging, much like I just said on the short side. You know, if we go back up, which zone are we going to reject? Are we going to have some decent up move now with a 3-month really pushing? A 3-month could just break all this supply in one go if it wants. Then the other thing on the bull side, and this is slightly negated now, was one thing I observed. So I did look back at the previous areas where the ETFs have very much got involved. So this is where the ETFs got announced, got commenced. And then when we had an up move, and when we came down to test, we tested just above that zone, and they protected their positions. Similarly here, I look back at where the ETFs have really started buying, and they didn't really start buying at the lows. Decent pump on Bitcoin now. They didn't really start buying at the lows. They bought heavily in this area. And then again, when the test happened, it got protected. And what we had was similar here, and it was at 93k that the ETFs really started getting involved. And now we've come down, you know, I was saying this was the circle I had as of last week. I was like, maybe that's the ETFs protecting their position with a higher bounce like they had in the previous times. Now, in this case, obviously it's come back down lower, but it's still in that area. And again, it doesn't have to repeat perfectly, but that was kind of one of the things I was looking at to see where the ETFs might protect their positions and how they respond to these drops. Particularly in light of, too many windows open. Here we go. The data. So we've had Bitcoin, we had very big selling, including on BlackRock, the last 2 days of last week. And we have had some ongoing selling, and then just general net negative flows for the last month. Similar on Ether, excuse my advertisements. Again, some fairly strong selling on Ether for the last month. So I was looking at, where do ETFs buy, and they're not buying. They tend to not buy the lows, but when we look at the previous consolidations, they tend to buy after prices bounced. So what I was then looking at on Bitcoin, I thought I drew it actually, but I guess, okay, it was that circle. So I was then saying, okay, well, if we'd had that bounce in there, or if we even get it now, what I would expect based on the previous is the price to run back up somewhere into this weekly, 2 weekly supply. And it was the same here. I think there was some macro supply here. There was some macro supply here. Not macro, mid-time frame, weekly or above. But yeah, they bought and they held the price consolidated in a small way in that area before the bigger breakouts. So what I would then look for is for this to bounce in here, for it to have a decent run, a decent impulse off the low. Here we had strong impulse off the low. Here it took a bit longer, but we had a strong impulse off the low. So we'd need to see that strong impulse off the low. I would want to see some consolidation in here rather than quick rejection, obviously. See the ETFs start to buy, see all the positive net flows, and then think we might get a breakout higher. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I think Korea now has also hit the 3-month demand, so everything's aligned. Like CME has hit 3-month demand, Korea has hit 3-month demand. We've got better alignment in general, so that's more promising. Note here, just locally, if you're trading this, that the Korean daily supply has not been tested yet. So while the US dollar pair appears to be wanting to come through that supply, just be aware that this could potentially just swing fail the high if the Korea pair, depending on what time it does. If it does it in New York, it might not matter so much. But if this ends up, messing around in here and hitting that zone in Asia, then it's possible we get a later rejection and this just takes out the high before getting another drop. So just be a bit conscious of that. This still has a 5-day supply above. It's also got a weekly in there. I think it doesn't have a 3-week, but does have a weekly, 5-day and weekly up here, which also hasn't been tested. And then, yeah, CME, like I say, is the same. 3-month demand in here. It's in the monthly and a 3-month now it's hit. Could still retrace deeper, still got that CME gap and then a bunch of other ones below if we care about those. US dollar dominance is aligned now for a bounce. Like I had this circle here for a while and I think I haven't really talked about it. Again, similarly, the local structure here is not dissimilar to Bitcoin. Obviously, in inverse, we have 5-day demand in here. We've got a 3-day that we already had. We've got another 5-day and 3-day here and a weekly below. And it, again, makes it hard to know which zone we're looking at if we're looking for a retest. And so I was looking back again to 2021 and see what happened. So obviously the structure in 2021 was very different because we were still retaining an uptrend. This is still in an uptrend, essentially. We're having 6-month demand down here. Yeah, there's a 6-month there. I was still potentially hoping for this 6-month lower, which we never got. But obviously the consolidation here has been significantly longer than what we had in 2021. But essentially we're equivalent to here when I refer to where we are in the structure from 2021. So it's similar. If we ignore the fact that the macro structure is a bit different, we're similarly here, triple top here, and just really deciding. So now, I guess this week, what we would expect normally is a retracement. If we're going to be very weak, actually, I suppose. Yeah, so I think it would be the second top, so that top or that top that completes the move down to the weekly demand of the green circle that I talked about on Bitcoin. Then later we get the bigger move. That's after that sort of a few month consolidation I think we had on Bitcoin at that point in time. So if we're going to get something similar, locally we've still got a daily demand, but what I want to see is this coming down into here and having some consolidation here. Maybe it goes down as deep as that, I'm not sure. And then we're looking for an up move off there if this is going to hold this triple tap sort of breakout. We've got a trend line that it's just trying to break here. There's a larger trend line a little bit higher, a higher time frame. not an ideal trend line, just off those two tops, a little bit of a trend line there. All the US dollar pairs are pretty much showing the same thing. US dollar C dominance is obviously a little bit different in structure. It's a second test of 3-month supply in here, also coming off, I think that's a 3-month at the low there rather than a 6-month. I had said previously, I've had these green, black and red lines drawn from back earlier this year, I think when we were still coming down here, or maybe we were consolidating here. And I was saying, structurally, this has obviously had a decent drop, but we're still in an uptrend. So the green line for me is the higher probability. I said, with what Bitcoin is doing, the black line was my mid probability if we were going to get the lower high and then get a drop down into this zone. And the red I thought was lowest probability. But obviously now we're still at resistance. We're still at the point in time that this needs to decide, is it going to give us, we had a local double bottom here. We could still get a local double top. We could still come back down into here and mess around before doing anything or even breaking down. So obviously this is not the time I want to be looking for longs on this or shorts on Bitcoin. If you want to scalp it, then I'd wait for a little bit to see if it comes back down into that zone. And we just need to see a little bit more of Bitcoin play out, I guess. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it on Bitcoin and associated for now. Let me have a quick look at Ether first, and then I'll look at the market cap and the alts a bit more. So Ether, I guess, is not really dissimilar to Bitcoin, but it was again more challenging. Well, certainly it's different in the bigger structure. So my concern on Ether has been very much that we've taken out this high here on a swing failure. So normally what that's telling me is that this demand from the bottom here isn't strong enough to beat the sellers up here. And even after, 3 goes here, you would have expected this to have a significant breakout. And unfortunately it hasn't. So that tends to mean that I would want to take out this low or at least that low. So that's the bearish, very bearish concern on Ether. Also, in addition to that, we didn't quite tap this 3-month demand down here. I'd need to look at the chart with more history to remember what we have here to the left. Let me just see what my drawings are saying. Yeah, so I guess we've got a monthly there and a monthly there, and then there was an annual level. So that was kind of where I actually really wanted this to hit the 700 when we came down in April 2022. So those are the kind of risks that we've got on Ether. Having said that, we also have this giant 3-month demand here. We've got a monthly inside it there. So those are the areas that I'm going to be looking for long entries and then just seeing what the reaction is. And the risk obviously is that we have the same structure as I was talking about on Bitcoin in 2022, that we've now rejected the high. This similarly swing failed here. This is swing failed different structurally, but come back down, and that it's not going to hold this demand when it tests. But that's the area I'm going to be looking for. We've already looked at locally for the bounce on the 3-month. So down on the lower time frames again. So I had, alert here on the higher time frame to see what happened on the reaction on the 3-month. The alignment wasn't great on Bitcoin, so it did wick into the zone. We've got this sort of flip level from back here, a couple of flip levels. So I've got those still drawn in to see if we pick up support in this general area where it was previously support, or there was a little bit wicky. Similarly, I thought this was my next area, filling a couple of CME gaps. If it was going to have a front run bounce, it could be around here. This is 61 fib. Ether does like the 61 fib. Check it is the linear fib, which again, it prefers to the log fib. The log fib is actually a bit lower down here. So those are what I was looking for on Ether. It did bounce. So let me just update that zone. So yeah, we've got that decent bounce. It had a decent bounce off that level. The other thing that I was concerned about was this area. So this was the area that I previously said I wanted to see become support. And you can see that we had multiple wicks into it, but it never managed to get high enough, and it had flipped weekly and 2-weekly supply above. So eventually rejected and came straight through there. But we had from back over here various zones on the monthly. There was a monthly, a yearly, and a 3-month levels that I wanted to hold. And obviously it tried to hold those, broke back through, and has rejected that general area as well. So that's the other risk on the lower time frames on this, is that, we're now obviously in a local downtrend. We've broken some significant support on the lower time frame. So are we going to come back to the start of this impulse? Similar to Bitcoin, we have 5-day supply, 3-day supply. I think in this case, I was toying with the idea of pulling the alert down to the 5-day. But again, like I say, this likes the 61 fib, and the 61 fib is still at the 3-day supply. So I've left this alert a little bit higher. But yeah, you're watching, if you're looking for longs on this, then you're looking for the reaction on here. Perfect world, we go straight through it. It's not the nicest zone, but that's the first area of interest or area of risk. Similarly here, we've only taken out the low on a wick. In this case, Bitcoin's a bit stronger, the drop has been a bit stronger, the drop. So this zone is stronger, but on Ether, it's weaker. So it is possible we run through to some of these higher zones additionally, because they haven't been tested. So again, the fibs on this is slightly harder because it's messy. So we've got the giant fib from all the way from the top, and that could see us come up quite high in this area towards the top of that red circle. The red circle are the areas I'm more interested in for the potential for shorts. So weekly supply, 2-weekly supply at those levels. We have left some stops here and some untested zones above. So again, it's a little bit challenging with how many zones there are. Then we've got just above the 61 fib here of this last down move. We've got another 5-day, 4-day. Just check 5-day, 5-day and 4-day supply in there. So again, a little bit challenging, lots of zones that it could reject if it wants to, or it may not get back anywhere near them. You can see back over here, once it's done the drop, it doesn't like to come back to retest. So when Ether's ready to drop, quite often it won't come back for a retest unless it's just going back up again. But again, I don't want to be overly bearish on this. Like, I don't like the lower time frame, but it has bounced on this as 8 or 12 hour zone in the middle of the first zone in that 3-month. So this could run from here. It is a 3-month demand, not the nicest demand, but it's a 3-month demand. So I'm not overly bearish on this. I don't want to be shorting these at these levels unless you're scalping lower time frames. But from a macro perspective, ideally you want to wait for back up here somewhere if you're looking for a higher time frame short, if you think that that's the top of the range and it's been swing failed and that's done. Career, I think, again, doesn't give much new. It's also on 3-month demand here. It's also got a 5-day locally. It's going to be a similar structure to the US dollar pair, and also CME, I think, is quite similar as well. Yeah, so all of those on 3-month demand. So the higher time frame is still very bullish, but there are signs that we should be wary of, having swing failed the top of the range, a lot of the supply coming in, this big gap that could be filled, lots of CME gaps all the way down on Ether as well. There's a big gap also from back in May that could end up being filled if it wants to. In its favor, I think the BTC pair, we had this test on weekly demand here. It's had a second test on weekly demand, and we also had Ether dominance come back and test this zone, which it hadn't on this wick. It has a lot of trend line stops on here if it wants to run through. It's got weekly supply and 5-day supply in there. So again, it's got risk areas, but it's got trend line. I say trend line stops. It's actually fairly irrelevant on ETHBTC, because ETHBTC has I don't believe you can short ETHBTC. Maybe I'm wrong. But it's not a traditional short in the US dollar derivatives futures that we're used to looking at. So whether it's really valid, it's not going to stop hunt shorts. However, it does mean, what the trend lines mean is that supply is unclear. So therefore, if we do want to test, we can run straight back through everything fairly quickly. And we saw that a lot on the majors. We also saw that even over here. It took its time coming back up, but when it did come back up, it didn't reject this monthly supply, and it came back through looking for these trend line stops. So you remember I had the alert for monthly supply, but I had said this could run through and take these trend line stops up here, which is exactly what it did. So we could get similar here again. We're still in a structure, an upward structure on the 2-weekly. If I show you the 2-weekly, still in an upward structure, still holding demand there. But now has this 2-weekly supply and this messy area in the middle, and then an untested weekly up there. So again, we need to see a little bit more from this. All of these are when I'm saying we're looking for reversals. If you've watched my YouTube videos, you'll know what that means. Like my educational videos, I'm looking for breaks in structure on the lower time frames, things to look to get long on. So if we go back to this chart, so Ether's not an ideal one because it's got supply really too close. However, you know, if we break this daily, what's a week daily supply at the moment, if we break that today, if we close above this blue dotted line here, we're going to flip this daily to demand, then we can potentially look for long entries on there, being conscious that we haven't broken supply. In a perfect world, we go up, we break this supply, we come back, we test, and then we have an up move like that. But also it's crypto, so sometimes it can take off and you may want to get in on the lower time frames. This did, while it's still in daily supply, it did actually flip a 12-hour demand in there. So again, if you want to trade based on that, there are trades available. You don't have to wait. If you wait too long, you may not get the trade, but if you do it too early, you then run a higher risk of being wrong and that this is still continuing a downtrend. The other thing I should comment on quickly is the indices. So just go to that quickly. So I talked last week about how the indices look like they might be starting to retrace. We did eventually get that. I had some zones, not on S&P, but some zones broken. Again, the higher time frame on these is still very much up. We're still in, if we look at S&P, excuse my mess. All my crosses, I really need to do an update on this to be able to hide all my crosses for the results. You know, this is still in an uptrend and we're still holding that 2-week demand there. It's come back down for a second test. This is one of the first times, though, that it has held a fairly decent drop off supply. So you can see, like, I occasionally put these aggressive shorts in just to see what happens. Like I was being far too aggressive here, so I stopped doing it quite so aggressively. After that, I kind of realized, yeah, that was just me being too, particularly because it was still making weekly demands. I was still getting weekly alerts off the lows. The difference with the indices, like FX, is more likely to have a rejection and then come back for the test for you. The indices tend to be like, they might give you a low time frame rejection, like here. The black crosses are looking for swing failures, so they're sort of fine, because if you don't get the swing failure, you just don't take it. But also indices, while it might give you a low time frame little retracement, quite often they don't come back to the long entries you want. And at the point they do start coming back, like up here, that can be when it's ready to break down. That's very much the difficulty, because if you're trading indices actively, you really need to be trading much lower timeframes than I put alerts for. So I only really go down to the 8, 12 hour, occasionally 4 hour, but mostly they're daily, 3-day, weekly and above. So for example, here it's a 2-weekly demand. It could, and you know, this happened to bounce off the top of it, but it could have taken its time. Similarly here, we came up into daily supply, had a short entry, had a brief rejection, then it went higher, didn't take out the zone, and then got the bigger drop. And now we're back to multiple tests on these levels. The thing with these is that they also, so Nasdaq and S&P both created a 4-day, 3-day supply the weekend. So you see we've got a 4-day supply here, which is just rejected. And it's rare that it does that. I mean, we have had bigger drops which have created, there was at one point, I think in here, maybe when I was being more aggressive, I think we did create a weekly supply, but even then went straight back up through it. So the indices obviously can be very inclined to just not care about supply when they're still in these strong uptrends on the higher time frames. So, but we're seeing what's happening there. But again, this means we should be slightly more wary on crypto, because we do have those supplies. And if we do follow TradFi, you know, the government shutdown, people were talking about maybe getting a what's the word, when the government reopened, you know, that it had all been priced in and that we were going to get a rejection retracement. So similar here, Nasdaq, you can see we've got a 3-day supply that has just been tested. I have got alerted the 4-day that's above, whether or not we get there. This does have trend line stops here, so I can actually see this one running through and coming back up to test this daily as well. It did hit, again, weekly demand. My alert went for 2 weekly demand, but it slightly front ran me there. On the bear side as well, a lot of these also still have the gap down here. Not many, I think, or at least of the major US indices haven't filled this gap yet. Russell is weaker than the others. Russell did fill that gap, so I believe that now. I'll leave that for now, actually, until I do my update video. But Russell did fill that gap, coming down into 5-day demand, but again has 3-day supply, 4-day supply there. I don't think it made a weekly. Sort of. Yeah, so it has closed under that weekly level. I've got it as a 2-week because the 2-week may confirm by the end of this week. But again, 4-day, 3-day supply, I've alerted on that. So I think we need to be slightly wary that even if Bitcoin does get a bounce up to that 3-5-day supply, that the indices, while they're still in bigger uptrends, could reject, and we could start to see a bit more of a retracement on indices at this point. What else to note? Aussie dollar has been significantly weaker now, has 3-week supply above. UK and EU have been stronger, but again have had fairly big drops as of Friday and have now started broken some local demand, or at least I think in the case of EU's come at least a lot deeper inside it. So we need to be a little bit wary, I think, on crypto of being too bullish based on these, or if we use this as an indicator. So Ether, I think there's not an awful lot more to say as well. Those are the zones of interest for shorts. These are the zones of interest for longs. Preference would be down in this monthly demand probably, unless I see something decent in here or some longer consolidation. I mean, what we really want is more time in here. I want to see, I don't want to see really this go straight back up again. While it does indicate strength, it also can indicate short squeeze and those sorts of things. So I really want to see, ETFs start buying. ETFs only really bought on Ether, I think, in this last run from when it was announced. So I think this is maybe when it was approved. I think it started trading around here as well, though, and it really did come down. I think they started buying at the bottom, but I need to see. I suspect that is where they really bought, but I would need to check. So again, are they going to protect that area by bouncing just above that area? If that's where they bought, I need to see. But ideally, we want to see some consolidation through here, some messing around, some people positioning in longs, some spot coming in, maybe some ETF buying before we have a quick move up, rather than just having a move straight up off here. Okay, so let's go back to the totals. So much like it, so these really show what we're seeing on Bitcoin to some extent and on alts. So I'm looking at these more from the perspective of what alts are doing. This obviously total one basically resembles Bitcoin. The major difference we had is that this made a monthly supply, whereas Bitcoin I think just saved itself from monthly supply. Then also similarly, you can see we've got the chop, we're hitting 3-month demand, but we've got 5-day supply in there, 3-day supply, weeklies, etc., and that monthly up there. Again, not an area to be looking for shorts, not right now. We can look at shorts potentially coming back into this 5-day when we see what the strength is coming off this level. What is that alert? Disappear. Okay. Total 2 obviously more resembles Ether, similar structure. We were looking for a bounce on this weekly or the monthly zone here. I would like to see this drift down to the weekly monthly, so it's the same with Ether. Ideally, I'd be looking for I'm not looking for long or short on this now. I don't want to long it when it's on, I don't want to short it when it's just hit 3-month demand, but I don't want to long it right into local supply. And this is it's a nice tight consolidation, which is good. And again, it's tested all these zones above. So it's possible if it runs, it can run straight through everything. You can see here, similar. This had been tested on that wick. This had been tested on that wick. This got tested on lower time frame wicks. So when it is ready to, it just runs through everything. That is a possibility here. But really, I'd like to see this come back down and test in at the bottom of that wick or into this monthly zone first. And if I miss it, I miss it because there's other things to trade that are higher probability. Total 3, which obviously resembles more of the majors. And I'll show the majors in a minute, but it's very similar. Again, we've got zones that have already been tested in here. We're in this 3-month demand. We've hit a 3-week inside that. We had a yearly level. I don't know if that was a yearly confirmed. Yeah, so that was a confirmed yearly demand in there. So it's holding here. So again, could see an up move here, but it's just not ready, or I'm not ready for it yet. I need to see either a push that flips some demand in here, or some consolidation through here, and then some daily demands or something holding ready for another move up. The bigger picture on all of these remains the same as Bitcoin. It is concerning that we have an impulse correction. This is weak. And this is what I've said many times on others. So while we had on Total, we took out the high. On Ether, Total 2, we took out the high. On others, which I'll get to now, we didn't. So I was saying for a long time that this was a corrective structure to me. I was looking for a head and shoulders. I've shown all the patterns of this. I've got them all saved. So I was looking for a head and shoulders. This is nothing new to anybody who's been following me. We had macro double top. We had on the totals, we had this other double top in here. This obviously, oh, actually, sorry, in fact, that's the double top. Here I was looking for the head and shoulders. It was giving me confirmation of that by the weakness of this up move. We then had some consolidation through here. It took longer than I wanted and became awkward to trade before this big drop, but that's exactly what I was looking for off there. The difficulty I have and had continued to have now is whether that's enough. Really, I wanted this to come down into here. That's my preferred area to look for longs on alts. However, this wick obviously has hit demand in here, second test. So it's challenging. It's a challenging structure with the corrective structures. And I still, nothing has changed on alts. Nothing has changed from what I've been saying for the whole year. That for me, each alt's are their own. I haven't been looking for alt season. I've been saying, some things bounce. It's very, very hard. It remains very hard to pick the ones that are going to suddenly go crazy. I've got a bunch of stuff I've looked at. They all have similar structures, and then suddenly one will take off, and I have no idea why that one. I don't know if it's, I doubt very much it's fundamentals, but I don't know if it's pump groups picking up on individual and pushing them up. Virtually all of them are retracing hard back down though. So what I'm looking for is them to hit supply and then just shorting them. So what will make this change for me? I'm really not sure. I mean, I guess I need to see an impulse, if this is, but we need to see it move like that to think there's going to be strength coming back into the alt market. But the problem is it's very hard to note that until after it happens or until at least halfway up. But what I can say on this is that it's not on a decent demand. There isn't what we're on a monthly demand here. I think we're in a 3 monthly supply on this. So it did close this candle below and it's pushed back up inside. It's really just a range. It's not the best supply, but still structurally, this is in a 3 monthly supply. We had this local monthly demand, which was making me more wary of whether this channel would play out. I sort of said that was the area. See, I had a circle here. That's where the area that I would have been looking for, is this not a channel? Is this a monthly demand that's going to play out? But then the wick just went straight through that zone. Similarly, so the other thing I had commented on, I did a short video on this a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago on where I was using DOT, NEAR and Atom, I think, as examples, where we had these trend lines stop. So while we come down here and we had made some supply in here, I was saying, and I used this chart to illustrate it, that we have weekly supply in here. So this is initially where I'd be looking for the rejection, but it is possible that we would run through taking these trend line stops. Now, what we've found is some alts have done that and not very many. So as a result, this chart remains rejecting that zone as we typically expect. It's now back in this daily demand, so it has another opportunity to maybe play out that taking out of the trend line stops there. But we'll see. Obviously, it's still thinking about it at this stage. So yeah, we had a handful of alts do that. I need to look, maybe I'll try and look at a few more of them at the end of this video, assuming this we're there 45 minutes already. So I'm already longer than I would like to be, typical me. Yeah, so we have the possibility we're going to go up here, but most of these alts are just retracing, and I wanted to look at, that's what I was getting to, I wanted to look at whether they were going to hold retest. So the ones where this candle, not the best example to look on this chart, but where the green has come all the way up to here, are they going to come back into this zone, retest, and then give us another move or turn bullish? And in the case of something like NEAR, I had been bullish on that, although it messed me around getting in at the lows with the wick. But I had been bullish on that for a while because it was coming off 3 month demand. And those are the alts that I'm more interested in as to whether they hold. So I think, for example, we had that. Obviously, we have all the privacy coins, which were just running anyway. They've clearly gone through a lot of supply. But things like BAT, I think Phil, Actually not Phil. I think Phil wasn't on the, what I'm looking at are those alts which had come into something on the left here. And of the majors that I look at, it was only near that had, I believe, or no, it's the normal majors. Anyway, so let's move on to the majors. Let me quickly finish. Okay, so my instinct on others is that this is still a downtrend. We still need to retrace more of this wick and it will go into here. However, I do think there's a possibility we get an up move into here before that happens. So I need to see more of this play out, and I've just alerted. So on a lot of the majors, what you'll see, and it's going to be obviously very dependent on what Bitcoin decides to do. A lot of the majors are all looking quite different now. Some of them, this move is down here. For those ones, I've put alerts for supply here. And I've still got some long alerts in. So Atom, Dot, and Near, all the long alerts went yesterday, but none of them actually hit the zones. So I reset all those alerts, but I'll show you those in a minute. So that's others. TOTALDEFI, similar. Again, got that 4 or 5 day supply, 3 day supply in there, but is on 2 monthly demand. So I'm just indecisive this now with the wick. Total E100, this I'm more bearish on. It's still, again, challenging because we have this 3 month demand. So remember, they deleted all the history on this, but they had it there previously. So I still have the boxes drawn and we've just got this floating price chart. These are the alts I'm more concerned about and the ones I don't think you should be looking for longs on, anything that has this 2 month supply here. So while everybody got excited on this up move, the vast majority of alts just came back into 2 month supply and many of them have just come hard off that now. There's just a handful that are stronger. So again, back in this daily demand, need to see what reaction we're going to get here, if anything, but I'm bearish on this because we're coming off 2 month supply. If I start to see a move up into here, if it flips some demand, then great, then we maybe can start looking for an uptrend. But at the moment, I won't look for longs on this while it's rejecting here 2 month supply. I'm expecting, well, really I expect to take out the wick, but the wick is obviously confusing. At a minimum, I would expect to take out that low from here. And if I see something different, then I see something different. But for now, that is what I would expect. Dominance makes things a little harder as well. So obviously Bitcoin still messing around through here. It's just a mess. So I think I was originally looking for a test on that 3 day, which never happened. So maybe we'll get a drift down into here with the dominance. And it's a question a lot of people were talking about, oh, dominance is looking more bearish and calling for alt season on that basis. And I don't really understand that theory because for me, I'm just seeing it go into US dollars. I'm not seeing it go into alts. With a little bit of an exception. I'll just go into that in a moment. But that doesn't necessarily, we are seeing some others dominance. So we're seeing, I think if you look at, I don't chart them, but if you look at some of these total ETHBTC, like our moving stablecoins and against BTC, those are where they're showing strength in alts against Bitcoin, but that doesn't mean they're going up. It just means they're going down less. So that doesn't mean you should long everything, in my opinion. And we're seeing at the moment that flow is going into US dollar dominance. And similarly, I've said for a long time that I don't expect all this run in BTC dominance is to do with ETFs buying, and ETFs do not rotate into shitcoins. They might rotate into Ether, Ripple, and some of the big grayscale ones, privacy coins like we've seen. We see grayscale's Zcash has really pushed. And that was saying potentially similar on BAT, although I think last week's drop has kind of repped that a little bit. Yeah, for the most part, I think we're not going to see that rotation into shitcoins. I mean, we might see that from retail, which can easily push the shitcoins up, but then there are a lot of them. So are we ever going to really see that giant pushes on others' dominance like we have here? I'm just not sure. Anyway, what we do have for now, so that was Bitcoin dominance, Ether dominance. I think I already said we've had this test on this weekly demand, so I want to start to see a push on this, but at the moment we're still in a local downtrend. Others dominance. So again, where we didn't see this on the market cap charts, interestingly, we see it on the dominance chart. So it's still in 2 month supply. So I still can't be fully bullish on this. It is coming off 6 month demand, which is decent. The wick went significantly lower inside it. So I can see the possibility of a push on this up to here. However, in 2 month supply makes it really quite hard to make that judgment for me. This is just in a sort of messy area. So I guess what all this is pointing towards is not a wholesale alt season, but if we are going to get we could still get an up move up, even if we just get up into here on this, it's holding 3-day demand, we have a weekly demand below, maybe it drops down into here and we get to move up, maybe it can get up into that area. But I still feel that that's not going to mean all alts are moving. It might just be the product of some alts moving, which is what we have here. So while we see this strong move on, when was that, 7th of November, most alts don't look like that. A few do. Like Litecoin looks stronger, NEAR looks stronger. I remember not many of the majors I have look particularly strong, but we have a handful that did this, Phil, BAT, and those ones that pushed, and all the privacy coins. But the vast majority of the market, which maybe are just indicative of lower market caps, are still back down here somewhere, which makes it all more difficult. So I still stand by what I said. I'm looking at certain alts that have kind of nice structures and that look like they may run, maybe have trend line stops above, but mostly I'm looking for those random pumps that you can short back down. I still think that's the highest probability trade. And the ones that have random quick pumps, should I say, I'm not looking at masses of shorts on Zcash and those sorts of things until they give me something proper. I have managed to get in on lower time frames, but I think one of the drops last week on Zcash, it's now come back and taken out the high. So you can look at the ABC on the things that run. So if they run up and then they do have a decent drop, then you can look at taking the BC, but I wouldn't be looking for, like something of Zcash that's gone up a lot. I'm not looking for it to go back down like that. I'm just looking to trade a BC here, maybe get into a long. I think Zcash didn't hit where I wanted it to, and it was a bit messy through here. But now that obviously has gone back up like that. So at the moment, I'm not looking for the aggressive high time frame shorts on those. So I'm talking about things that ran like yesterday, like Light, Cross. Those are the two that I can think that happened over the weekend that we managed to get in decent shorts on. And the shorts remain still higher probability. I've had a lot of shorts and a lot of long alerts come through. And the shorts are still the ones that are working better. It's always hard to say no, because I know I'm better at shorting. I'm better at choosing the zones. So there is some bias in that or potential bias that the shorts are working better because I'm better at them. And I'm not picking as good zones for the long side, maybe. However, either way, the alerts that are coming in my channel, and for the people who follow me in my channel, take the shorts. Yeah, so anyway, total DeFi dominance, again, is really just sideways in here. And total E100 dominance. So again, I was hoping we might get a bigger push on this is the E100 is excluding the top 100. So these are the real shit coins, like pushing and taking out the supply. Could still happen. Is testing a 4-day demand there, I think, or a 4 or 4-day demand. But again, difficult because it's in 2 months supply. So while we can see trend line stops, I'm still in 2 months supply. What I really want, when I see something like this, ideally what you want is the rejection, come back into demand, at least get the long in demand. Maybe it's going to give you an aggressive one here, but this is really where I'd want it in this 3-day, and then that second push. So you're looking for still get the rejection off the 2 month supply, but maybe it makes a higher low, or it takes out this low, and then we get the takeout of trend line stops. But still your bias is looking for a short based on the test here on 2 month supply. Anyway, that's that. Let's move on to the majors, and then try and got 7 minutes to keep this under an hour, which doesn't look like it's going to happen. So, as I said, shorts remain the better entries on these. How to do this quickly. So let's just go through them one by one. I think it's quicker. TRX. Looking for, there was a 5-day, a 2-week, and then a 3-week demand. So I was looking for reversal signs here, had an aggressive entry on daily demand here, did wick through that zone. It's now sort of thinking about it. This is an indecent supply. So if I was going to long any of them, this would be the one that I would look to long. Has 5-day supply here, which I have alerted. At this stage, it's consolidated long enough for me to think that, and with this drop, that it could well push through here. And then we've got weekly supply above. Also noting that this is still a larger uptrend. It's kind of corrective compared to that push here. It is still kind of corrective, but this could still do a push like that if it wants to. My preference would be long entries down here on 2 week, 3 month demand down there. May or may not get it. So potential shorts here, preferable shorts up there. Longs just need to see a bit more in here. There's like once it's wick through here, but you can start looking for longs on this, I think. Or failing that, if it comes back down, 3-week demand, and then there's 2-week, 3-month below there. Just need to see a bit more. It's just a little bit early. Litecoin obviously was, so this was one of the ones that took out, it just didn't really have trendline stops, but well, it had trendline stops here, which it took out there. Then it came back down, but when it pumped back up through, so this is similar to what I just showed on the TRX, there was a 4-day supply in here, which I did have alerted, but in this case, it went straight up through. So I could see the same happening on TRX. Unfortunately, didn't quite get up to my next entry, so there was a 3-week supply up here. It wicked very close to it, but didn't come back up. Wouldn't mind seeing this testing in here as a 4-hour and then a daily demand, and then getting that push. But TRX is a hard one on the macro, and I've been reluctant to give really strong entries on this for a while. I don't think many people trade it anyway. Like, I want to be bullish on this on the macro. We are in annual demand down here, but we've also consolidated here for the best part of 10 years. So a lot of people say, oh, this could do a ripple. Yes, it could do a ripple. It's in this giant similar triangle. Well, actually, it is not dissimilar to what I said on Ether. Taking out the high there could very easily take out these lows. So maybe we look at something like that before it goes up. But, you know, it's been going sideways at least, you know, even if I ignore the first half of this, it's been going sideways since around 2022. Are you going to hold this expecting that ripple style breakout and the massive move? Oops, didn't mean to do that. This expecting this massive up move on this. Just realised I also forgot to put my my orange cursor on to make it easier to see where my mouse is. Unfortunately, it's a bit late in the game to do that, but yeah, so I've been reluctant to give decent long entries on this for a while. I have had some, but multiple tests on these demands now. I don't like multiple tests. Once you start going to, like, second test is one thing. Once you start going to third, fourth test, then you start looking at zones breaking or getting giant wicks through things like here. This had made a weekly demand. It's, however, now closed back. Sorry, yeah, it made a weekly demand last week by closing above that red candle. It's now closed back below it. I haven't put an aggressive short entry on this. It's not as clean as I'd like it. I want to see what the test is like down here first. Got that 3-week supply up there. It's also left a bunch of stops. Took some stops here, but the stops double top up there, and this 3-month supply, which I think, yeah, we did test that 3-month on this wick. So again, it's even to the upside and the downside. It's all the zones are already tested, so I'm not really particularly keen on this on any time frame. Ripple was a lot more bearish. I realized it. So I had updated this in the channel last week. It had a 2-week supply, which it rejected. And I had updates on that, and I had an alert for the 3-day and then the 2-week, and it went up to the 2-week. It did take out the 3-day. I then really stupidly it created this 12-hour demand here. So I thought, well, it's worth looking for a long in case it takes these trendline stops out. With hindsight, that was stupid. It was on 2-week supply. I should know better than doing that. This is why I don't long into 2-week supply. So it came up. It did have a strong test on that candle, but rejected straight down, came straight back through that zone. This has now made a new weekly supply here. Is that weekly or is that the old? Yeah, it has made. No, sorry, that was the weekly from the previous. I put an alert there for 12-hour supply on that just to see. All of the majors now are really just in these consolidations, and we're looking, you know, are they going to break? They're either going to continue to hold these and continue to go down, or we're going to start seeing breakouts like that, which are just going to take out zones. I hope those will happen quickly. So even if this, you know, don't limit order in these, just wait for the alerts to go. If you get them, we'll put your own alerts if you're not receiving mine, and then see what reaction is. I can see that, you know, there's a 12-hour up here that hasn't been tested, and then there's a monthly supply on this that hasn't been tested up there. So at any point, this could run up and just jump into that monthly supply. That for me would probably be a top signal. If that happens randomly outside of the rest of the market. But for now, anyway, I'm pretty bearish on Ripple. It's made a new 3-day supply here, which it has rejected off. It's got the 12-hour inside it. I kind of said on this that, you know, the 3-day demand down here, there's 2 3-day demands, and then there's a yearly right at the bottom there. But the 61 fib of that wick is on that, back on that 3 days. So that's really where I'd like to look for longs on this. But now this is not. like I say, there are trades here you can take if you want to, but none of them for me are particularly high probability. I'm putting alerts in so that people can just see my thought processes, but I don't think this is not a high probability short. Something you can watch if you want to scalp. The same with all the majors at the moment. They're in these sort of messy structures that we need to get some breakout of the structures, or just a bit more clarity. BCH is kind of making a nice triangle here. I watched another video of somebody else earlier today. I think they're very bullish on this. I, however, am not, because we made a monthly supply. It did reject it. I think I made it here and it rejected it on this candle in this area. So it had that immediate rejection. Could go higher in the zone. Does have a 4-hour untested up here, and it's now made a new 2-weekly supply in there. So I have put an alert for that 2-weekly. Has trendline stops that makes it more difficult. But yeah, so I wouldn't mind. It's got that higher low now. Gosh. It's got the higher low and lower highs. But the higher low here, we could get a move up that takes out this high and then potentially get the short from there. It's possible it even takes out that high and we get the short from higher. So those are two things I'd watch there, but my bias on BCH at the moment is bearish because we've got monthly supply. And then I want to reconsider when we hit this 3-month, 1-year demand. I still have some nervousness. I've got that level alerted, but just as a reminder, we do have all these stops under here. This could wick heavily through if it wants to, particularly if Bitcoin decides to fall down to like 85K or lower. Again, this made 3-day supply and daily supply, so locally it's not something I want to long either. It's holding those last 2 entries I had, so I guess that's decent. If you are holding on to longs on that, you can see, but my bias is bearish on this for now. Yeah, so that's the old majors. I'm trying to think, there aren't really many new alerts, I think, since I did updates. I think Ripple is the only one that I've got the new short alert on. Everything else remains as I've put in the channel, and BCH, because I noticed, I think I've forgotten that I hadn't seen that this had the 2-week supply in here, so I threw in a short alert in case it takes out that high. So those are the 2 new ones, and other than that, I think everything remains the same. Then the new majors. So these are the larger caps, which have shown more weakness than the smaller cap majors or at least the ones I'm tracking. So none of these really had that strong bounce last week that we saw on Litecoin and then Near, Dot and Atom. Maybe not Atom so much, but Near and Dot had stronger moves that went up through trendline stops, like these didn't. They had the trendline stops up here and they just had this move up to supply. So I think Link is one of the only ones that actually hit my zone. The others I was less aggressive on. BNB was higher, 4 or 5 day supply up there, and then a weekly inside that. So I was toying. Okay, so I'll go through each of these one by one again more quickly, but this does have a new 5-day supply, 3-day supply. All of these really have the 5-day and 3-day that Bitcoin has. They look very similar. They're following those similar patterns. They're not as weak as Bitcoin, like they didn't make lower lows. So you can look to short in here, or at least some of them didn't, some of them didn't, should I say. BNB didn't. So I was toying with the idea of putting in a short entry here, but I just think it's too tight a consolidation, and I still think it could run up to there. BNB can do its own thing if it wants to. Similar to, I think, TRX, like this is still on weekly demand. So while we've had a massive drop, it is still holding a 2-weekly up structure, I believe. Again, like BCH, does have stronger stops down here. So this was always my preferred entry for longs back down on 3-month demand, but the next alert is just under those immediate stops. But I'm not going more aggressive on the short side here, but my bias is still short for now on this. Link, move that so you can see the chart a bit better. Link again. So remember, I was bearish on Link for a while when this hit. I think it was 3 months. There was 3-month supply on this, but we'd also had the BTC pair hit 6-month supply. Again, went up a bit higher inside it and took its time to drop. But again, it's just battling with it, come off monthly supply and potentially back in monthly demand now. So need to see a bit more on this. And these majors now have just become extremely messy. So really on all of them, this just resembles that others chart, doesn't it? It's had this corrective move or potentially corrective move. There's an impulse here, but become more corrective off the back of this drop. Need to go up to a higher time frame, really. So we had impulse up, we had a drop, then we've had this corrective up move, similar channel kind of structure that we had on others. And are we just going to get a move down for a zigzag or even for a triangle? Again, may have done that on that wick. Very, very hard to judge. And one person in one of my other channels said, oh, the wick signifies a buyback. Well, that's what we normally observe from wicks. And while I typically would agree with that, this wick is really an aberration. Like, it's not, in a way, I think we should ignore this wick because it was the Binance and Wintermute market maker issues that caused that wick. And on some of the, on not all the charts do we see this. Like Coinbase, if you look at Coinbase charts, like, I haven't looked at all of them, but I know, for example, like Dogecoin, like it has a giant wick on Binance, but nowhere near as big on the Coinbase chart. So this wick is really, that's why I'm still looking at whether these demands are going to pick up, because they're still going to be visible on some of the other charts. But I haven't got the inclination to go through every chart and have a look. Anyway, for now, Link, we got the rejection. This was a more aggressive one entry that I had there off 3-day supply. It has a weekly above and 4-day above. So again, could come back there. Now made this new 5-day, 4-day. So on this, I have put a more aggressive alert here. Again, still runs the risk that this hasn't made a significant low. It has made a low, whereas BNB hasn't, but it's not really a significant low. But I want to see the reaction, see if this monthly zone can ever start to kick in. Dogecoin, very similar. So some of the ones that I had these long entries on the new daily demands in the hope that we were going to get another push up to there, only got a little bounce, had already made daily supply and is again come back lower. So not the best on the long side, didn't also hit on the short side. So Doggy has a weekly supply in there, so I've alerted that if it does come up. All the same considerations remain that I've talked about previously as well. Like, all of these have these trendline stops. So while I've set alerts here, they could run through, as I'll show you on there, and as we saw on Litecoin, if they want, they could run through, take out these stops and go up to the higher untested zones. But we just need to see what reaction we get as and when, if the zones hit. But I don't want to be too assuming that we're going to go back up and test, because when the crypto is ready to come down, you'll see over here, it didn't test. This one will start to test, and then some point will come back up later. And now, obviously, a lot later, it's come back to test this zone. In fact, hasn't even quite tapped at that high. But when crypto is ready to fall, then it doesn't let people get out. It will not. So while these structures are not overly clear because of the giant wicks coming off them, I want to have some more aggressive entries and some less aggressive entries. So in this, it has made local 5-day and 3-day supply, but I haven't been as aggressive on this. So I've remained with the alert higher. It was only Link, I think I pulled it lower. And in ADA, I also pulled one lower as well. So ADA again has made a lower low here with 3-day, 5-day supply in there. So I've alerted the 3-day, but does have zones up here that remain untested, and also zones above. So again, just need to see the reactions. Are we going to ignore the wick? Is this consolidation down? Consolidation, sorry, that very badly. Consolidation, next wave down, up. Not really any consolidation there. Next wave down, retest, next wave down, retest, etc. Are we in that type of structure? Or are we going to take out these stops that hasn't broken this low significantly into these zones and then have a drop? Those are the two things I'm looking for right now. And ADA, I've got an alert down here for 3-month demand. Should it get there? So similar. So anyway, I'm not sure I've talked about all the long side on these, but 2-month demand on Doggy, 3-month demand on ADA. I think Link, I haven't really got anything because it's got a lot of tests. It does have a monthly level in here, but it has a lot of tests already. So very, very difficult scenario for these at the moment. And then finally, the lower cap majors that I have. So except for Sol. So Sol, let's start with Sol because it's the one that looks completely different. So Sol obviously resembles much more the previous majors. It's a larger cap and it's way weaker. So this is the weakest of all of them. And this was always the difficulty. So again, I had the long alert here for daily demand in the hope it would give us a push up into this zone, which didn't get that. It just came back through. This is something I struggle with, that when you get, so this had bounced and was one of the weakest of all of these when it bounced last week before last. But I'm never quite sure if that means it's still building up, it's still consolidating, it hasn't made it to supply where I want to short, so therefore I should look for a long entry, or whether I should take heed that it's weaker than everything else and then not long it. And in this case, it's proved that I probably shouldn't long it. Yeah, that's the difficulty on some of these, because sometimes you can get them, you want that extra up move, but in fact here it just ended up being the weakest. So similarly has made a 5-day supply in here, so I've alerted that for a possible short entry. Now Sol, the wick wasn't as big in fact, so it's now taken out the wick and it has come back down into this 12-hour demand at the bottom of that last up move. But again, from a higher time frame perspective, we have this up move here, consolidation, up move, broke structure here, but did come back into monthly demand, but did take out that low. Therefore, solid to look for short entries there. But so now we're saying, are we going to take out that low? Is this the bigger downtrend starting? So that's what I'm considering on Sol. Similarly, in the bigger picture, we've got this macro double top. So a lot of these same things that you're seeing on the others charts, you can see on all these charts, and again, the considerations. From a demand, so that's the macro structural perspective, high lows, swing highs and swing lows and fake outs, etc. But then we still do have monthly demand in here. Did this make a 3-month supply? This also, in fact, made a 3-month supply, but it flipped it to a 3-month demand. But are we going to hold this zone if we come back for a test here? Is this just a giant consolidation sitting on top of this zone that's going to give an up move? Or are we going to take out that low and start seeking out lower demands for and then now developing downtrend? So anyway, for now, we're bouncing on this 12-hour demand at the start of this up move. We're still same as Bitcoin, still got a daily supply. Might get an up move from here. Not overly confident. It's not a zone that I want to look for longs, but it is a zone that might get a bounce. So I might be shorting this right now, but also I don't want to look for longs. Below, we've got a daily demand there and another daily demand here. So I've alerted the other one, but again, these are not high probability zones. My next preference, weekly down here, but obviously if it starts breaking down this range, then people are going to get very bearish. So if we do come down into here, then I'll certainly be looking for shorts for the lower high. And then potential on this to get all the way down to there. It's not dissimilar to the ether structure. Down to here, or even taking out that low. Like noting that we didn't come back into this zone to start with. I don't know, those are the very bearish scenarios in the high time frames, the very, very high time frames. But obviously it can take a few years to do that. Okay, moving on to the others. So start with near because, oops, I just pulled my alert up by mistake. So near up to the higher time frame. So from these 2 hits on this and then all these subsequent hits, I've been bullish on this because we're in this 3-month demand. As I always say, we could still come down to here, and this is still bullish based on the 3-month. Having said that, the bigger picture, yes, we're on 3-month demand, but it's a weak 3-month demand. But still, normally you'd expect a bigger reaction than what we've got so far, and that's really what I was hoping for on there. Fortunately, no, you don't always get what you get. We are in this potential triangle structure. So we have 3-month demand here and we have 2-month supply up there. So in a perfect world, we would have got a bounce here on 3-month demand up to 2-month supply. That's what I was looking for. That is what we didn't get. We consistently got bounces, but we're not able to take out this weekly supply to even get up into that 3-month. And even with the most recent bounce, which was solid compared to a lot of the rest of the market, this move didn't manage to take even the stops over these highs. So I have an alert here for just if we stop hunted some of these highs and then the 2-month supply above, then there's a 3-week inside it. So really near still in this forming this range. We're coming back into mid-range. We do have a 3-day demand in there. So I have this alert that went off yesterday, like I said, to see the reaction here. The problem is now on a lot of the other alts, I'm seeing this zone get broken down. Does have a 12-hour right at the bottom. But again, just want to see the reaction as it comes into there. But I want to have hope on this, but similar to the comments I made on Litecoin, we're in, it's obviously nowhere near the length of time, but this has been in a sideways consolidation for the better part of a year. Sideways consolidation for a year, drop, sideways consolidation for a year, could break either way, but we need to wait for the break. So you want to long the lows and short the highs, by all means. I want to say I'm bullish because of 3-month demand at the lows, but I also need this to do something. I don't want to hold on to this. I'm not a holder. And we've now been in the range too long for me to be overly confident, like looking for longs and shorts in the range. So I really need to see this have a decent move up. If this doesn't bounce easily, even the one below, these need to move fast off there to show that this 3-month is going to play out off that wick. Else this could be in a sideways range forever. But you can see, anyway, this did play out the example that I gave on the others chart. It did take out the trend line stops. I had 2 alerts. I think there was a 4-day supply and a weekly supply in there, and it went all the way back up to this weekly at the top. So those are what I was looking for on any of the majors. And I think, yeah, Litecoin and NEAR were the only 2 that gave me that. Oh, and DOT. So DOT was actually much more perfect in a way. The difference with DOT is not on 3-month demand. DOT is at all-time low. That wick's come significantly down into it. So DOT I'm not bullish on like I am on NEAR. However, if the whole market does, then the whole market does. These do tend to follow each other. And that's also what makes me, I guess, with the others looking much more bearish in the higher time frame picture, like DOT and Atom, like is NEAR, which is more bullish, but not exactly bullish. It's just ranging. It's in that giant triangle. That's not necessarily, is that going to run on its own? And maybe if it has some narrative like the privacy coins, but anyway, so DOT exactly the same scenario here. It did run up through those trend line stops, run up through this 4-day or 1 weekly supply, whatever was in there, ran through that into the 2-month supply up there before it got a nice rejection. Hasn't given me a retest, unfortunately. I did put some aggressive retests, not so aggressive as it turns out, on this because of the 2-month supply. So I had an alert here for daily supply, but the wick didn't quite hit it. And then I have added an alert. This now has made a new weekly supply in there. May also make a 2-weekly a little bit higher. So I have again put a more aggressive alert for a possible short on that. It is aggressive, like this could still retrace higher inside that zone. So just be conscious of that. And now this daily demand, you need to see what the reaction is there. I'm not overly confident of this one. Again, low probability coming off 2-month supply. Just need to see what the reaction is. Atom is seemingly trying to be a little bit stronger. So Atom didn't take the trend line stops. It did reject off that 4-day supply. So you can see now why I'm alerting those, because they don't have to run through. They don't have to take trend line stops. So it's always worth seeing what the reaction is. Typically, if they do run through, they do it quite quickly as well. So the fact this stopped here for an extended period and also then made me think, okay, well, let's look for a possible short. And it didn't take out the high again, but I think it did go through. Not sure. I think it was a 4-hour supply. Yeah, so it alerted this 4-hour supply in there, but so it did go back up, take out the 4-hour, but it didn't take out the high. In the defense of all of these, I have to say, so Atom, NEAR, and DOT, like they are coming down slowly. They're coming down much more consolidating rather than pounding straight back down hard, which is a good sign for them. But really would have been nice if they'd hit my zones for that initial bounce. So again, daily demand in here. This is, the wick went through, I think went almost to 0. Excuse me, at first I thought that was all-time low, so I need to take that off probably. That's going to confuse, not that. You need to take that orange line. It was because there's equal lows there, but I thought that was all-time low, but it in fact isn't. So this has a monthly demand here. This is a zone I was waiting for God knows how long, like with each of these bounces here. I was like, I'm not buying this until it gets below $3. And then obviously it got a lot below when it eventually did. Let me just see what other zones are in here. That one got taken out. There is a weekly zone down there. So that would probably be where I'd look for another long on this if it is going to continue to drop. See if there's anything else that I need to be aware of. 5-day in there. yeah, it's not going to be overly clear, but yeah, so again, taking out that low is a possibility on this. But also, this could still hold here. So this has had the wick, giant wick through monthly demand again. Maybe if you want to trade this, check the Coinbase chart or one of the other exchanges to see if they all wicked as heavily through here, or whether some of them are all holding this monthly zone. So I had the black cross for the retest of this monthly zone. It did come down obviously deeper inside it. Then we had a nice long entry on, I think it was a 12-hour demand here. And it's having a fairly nice slow consolidation off this now. It's one of the few actually that didn't make a new 5-day supply, because the structure was a little bit different. In fact, neither did NEAR, but DOT did make that weekly. So again, you can see whether you get a long entry off here, if it gives anything decent. It's still got that weekly supply there that hasn't been tested. Could again still take the trend line stops and run up. It has a 2-monthly supply higher up here. So, but overall, Atom has typically been the weakest, and for long periods of time, I've said I want to take this off my majors list, but I have yet to identify what I want to replace it with. The whole purpose of these majors is so I can really track the complements with Bitcoin. So they need to broadly be doing what Bitcoin's doing to help me when Bitcoin is sometimes messing around with trying to grab liquidity and not holding zones. What I'll see is these majors holding zones. But if they start doing too much of their own thing, they tend to become quite useless. The only thing which has been helpful is the downtrend, the continued downtrend that we've seen over this weekend on Bitcoin. Like it was quite clear and remains so on DOT, NEAR, some of the others, that they weren't at support. So even now they're not quite at support. So really, I'd like to see longs on Bitcoin when these have actually hit into those zones, assuming they're going to hold. But that's the complements I look for across the market. Anyway, I think I've rabbited on for 1 hour and 20 minutes now. I will get this uploaded on YouTube so I can share it and hopefully get some trades later this week. I'm trying to think of a quick summary, really. So I've given you all the entries that I'm looking at on Bitcoin, Ether, and majors. Told you what I consider not necessarily high probability. And the reasons I'm putting them in. So like most of the majors, the alerts within the ranges aren't particularly high probability, but may give you something. As I said, on alts in general, I'm really looking for the excessive pumps and to short them back down again. I'll tell you, so the only thing I'm looking at that I like for longs at the moment has been this CLO. All these trend line stops above. It came back into 12-hour demand here on Metsy and on Binance. So I was looking for that. I had an alert here just because I wanted to see the pump. This wasn't for a short. I had 2 alerts in yesterday, and then eventually it made 12-hour demand. So this is something you can watch for possible long entries. You need to wait for new demand now and for this to consolidate a bit more. Don't buy like right now. If this makes a daily demand today, that could be a good long entry for tomorrow. Be conscious that it still does have 4 or 5 day supply, even though it's got the trend line stops. And then beyond that, a lot of other stuff that I'm just looking at, either aggressive shorts, you can see like KGen, or when things hit big pumps that hit supply. Truth, for example, is just sitting in a 12-hour supply there. But Light, for example, so this, I had 2 alerts on yesterday. 12-hour here, and then second 12 hours, this obviously went straight back up to the 12-hour, looking to short these things back down when they overly pump. There was Light, and then there was Cross. Where's Cross? Great example, up into monthly supply, just bang straight down off it. So those are really your high probability trades at the moment for me. I did have what else? I'm having a lot of things hit long entries, but these are, even anything that's going to hit, and they're hitting either major or minor zones below. I need to see more consolidation before I'm going to think we're going to go into a bull market. Because at the moment, even things that are very strong, and I have aggressive long entries just aren't holding. And even things that have monthly demands and things like that just aren't holding. Excellent. That's finally bounced, has it? Yeah, so anything that was even stronger, like earlier this month, like really did come down hard with Bitcoin last week, and more aggressive entries I'd had aren't holding. Anyway, XBG, I keep saying getting pulled to this. I had a nice long entry off that as well, and that has now finally come back through supply. But again, if I get a pump on this up into here, start looking for short entries. What else? I haven't looked at enough alts today to really give some decent examples. This is interesting, actually. I did want to look at some of these, things like DUSK, which did give those big pumps. So the odd one of these, so like I think I say Phil and DUSK, obviously it being one of them, pumped up through the monthly supply for a swing failure. So we need to see the closes at the end of the month. If that alert's gone, maybe it's gone while I've been on stream. But I wanted to see these tests, and they came back down. So you can see DUSK has held quite well on that test. Phil, I think I had a more aggressive one that it was coming through the other day. I don't know if it's hit the next one or not. So yeah, I had one on the 4-hour demand there, but it still has gone through now. I want to see this come back down here. The difference though, when you compare something like Phil to DUSK, so this really did have very few candles going up. This isn't going to be the best 3-day zone, whereas in contrast, what's DUSK now? You can see this has got more chop here, so it's more likely to hold a retest of that zone. Similarly, this is on monthly demand here, whereas I think Phil had hit all-time low. That's that now because I can't remember. Yeah. So Phil obviously more likely to reject and come right back down again. So I think it did run through, it certainly ran through a monthly supply here, but straight up into 2 months, 3 months supply. So again, got the short entry. You can just short these all the way back down again. Let's see what that is doing. This might not be the right chart, no. I might have a good ability to talk for hours, don't I? Okay, yeah, so that had a weekly demand in here. I think I didn't actually alert it, or I think I had an alert for some lower time frame back here, and now it's gone on 3-day demand inside the weekly. So I need to see if something like this gives a bit more build up. I was more bullish on this because I did like what the grayscale chart was doing. But like I said, that last week's drop has, I think, thrown things off a bit. So I'm not sure if these are going to hold, or they're going to do much more. But so many of these are just trapped between major supply and major demand, and it makes it really quite hard. So 6 months supply there, monthly demand, or possibly 2 monthly demand down here. I'm not sure. Like my macro bias is still down until I see things break out. So so you've got this big down move, you've got the sideways consolidations broken down, is retesting, are we looking for that? Or, are we finally in, this is the up move, this is a retracement, and that's the up move. But while we're still under 6 months supply in here, it makes it hard to be bullish. But then, once we've done that, that's what you want to look for, the test, once it's actually broken this supply. And by then people think they're too late. But then, you might have to wait for the next alt season. You might miss the first alt season, but then the second alt season is going to be higher probability. Anyway, before I chatter on too much more, I will upload this video. If you have any questions, please hit me up on Telegram. If you like the video, please like and subscribe to support me. If you want to see more, if you have different ideas of other things you want me to cover, again, feel free to give me any feedback. And I hope you have a good week. I may try and do another stream later in the week and update. Or I didn't actually give an update on the lower time frame. I don't know if I really need to. I know there's not really much to add, I think, on Ether or Bitcoin. No, I think I've already covered in the higher time frame what I had on this. And there's nothing really new. It's those 3 5-day supplies above. So the quick summary on Bitcoin is I'm looking at those. We need to get through immediate daily supply at the moment, which is struggling. Then we've got 3 5-day supply above, which is where I'm looking for my first possibilities of shorts. Then both of them also have weekly above that. in the bigger picture, both Ether and Bitcoin are on 3-month demand, so we could see some giant up move. That is a possibility. So be careful on the short entries. You're waiting for confirmation or just trading with scalps. We really need to see what this 3-month demand is going to do at this stage. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Again, hope you have a good week. Please like and subscribe if you're interested, and hit me up in chat if you have any questions. Have a good day. Bye-bye.